The slave market on Station Omega-9 was the largest in 12 star systems. Beings from many conquered worlds were kept in cages like animals. They were bought and sold like objects. The station floated in the darkness of space, far from any law or justice. In one of the smaller cages, a human woman knelt on the cold metal floor. Her name was Park. She was 28 years old. 3 months ago, she had been a combat medic in the United Earth Defense Corps. Her rescue shuttle had crashed on a mining colony. They had found her in the wreckage. They had never seen a human before. They thought she would make an interesting slave. Was small. She stood only 160 centimeters tall. Her body was lean and tired. Her eyes showed the weight of too many battles, too much death. But deep inside those tired eyes, something still burned, something they could not see. They were the masters of this sector of space. They stood nearly 3 meters tall. Their skin was gray and covered with thick scales. Each one had 4 powerful arms. They had conquered 11 species through strength alone. They believed they were the top predators in the galaxy. No one had ever proven them wrong. The auctioneer grabbed by her hair and pulled her to her feet. He was a fat with gold rings on all 4 arms. He smiled at the crowd of buyers with his sharp teeth. "This one is weak," he announced loudly. "But humans are new to our markets. They say humans can adapt to anything. Good for mining, good for labor. Starting price is 200 credits." The buyers looked at with curiosity. She was so small compared to them, so fragile-looking. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. What use was such a tiny creature? A wealthy merchant named raised one of his 4 hands. He was dressed in expensive robes. His scales were polished and shining. He owned many mining operations on the jungle moon of 3. He always needed more workers. 200 said. 250, another buyer called. 300. 400. Smiled 450, final offer. No one else spoke. The auctioneer slammed his staff on the ground. Sold, the human goes to of 3. 2 guards came forward to collect. They were large even for. Each carried a shock baton that crackled with blue electricity. They grabbed her arms roughly and began to drag her toward her new owner. Did not resist. She kept her head down. She let them think she was broken, but she watched everything. She noted how they moved. She saw where their armor was weak. She counted their weapons. One of the guards grew tired of her slow walking. He raised his shock baton and struck her hard across the face. The electricity burned her skin. The force knocked her to the ground. Blood began to drip from her split lip. The crowd laughed. Such a weak creature, such easy entertainment. Stayed on the ground for a moment. She felt the pain. She tasted the blood. Then slowly she pushed herself up, first to her knees, then to her feet. She stood straight and looked directly at the guard who had hit her. "Don't hit me again," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. The translator implant in her neck made sure every heard her words perfectly. For a moment there was silence. Then the guards burst into laughter. The crowd joined them, even chuckled from where he stood. "Did the little human just give us an order?" one guard said between laughs. "I think she did," the other replied. "How amusing." The first guard leaned down until his face was close to us. His breath smelled like rotting meat. "What will you do, tiny creature? Bleed on me." Said nothing. She just looked at him with those tired, burning eyes. Walked over and examined his new purchase. He grabbed her chin with one hand and turned her face left and right. He looked at her like a farmer looks at livestock. "Spirit," he said with approval. "That is good. You will need spirit in the mines. They break most slaves within a month. Perhaps you will last too." He released her chin and nodded to the guards. "Bring her to my ship. We leave within the hour." The guards pushed forward. As she walked, she passed rows of cages. Inside were beings from many worlds. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and round. All of them had one thing in common. Their eyes were empty. Their hope was gone. One cage held a group of. They were a delicate species with 4 eyes and pale blue skin. They had conquered their world 2 generations ago. They were born into slavery and would die in slavery. That was all they knew. A young girl watched pass. She was perhaps 16 years old. Her 4 eyes were wide with something recognized. It was fear, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, a tiny spark of wonder. Why had the human stood up? Why had she spoken back? Didn't she know it was pointless? Met the girl's eyes for just a moment. Then the guards shoved her forward and the moment passed. As she boarded its transport ship, allowed herself one small thought, one small promise. They had laughed at her warning. They had dismissed her as weak and broken. They looked at her small body and saw nothing to fear. That was their first mistake. It would also be their last. Sestate sat on the jungle moon of 3. The air was thick and hot. Strange birds screamed in the trees. The ground was soft and wet from constant rain. It was a miserable place to live. It was an even worse place to die. The mining complex was built into the side of a mountain. Slaves worked 16 hours a day digging for precious ore. The ore was used to power starships. It made very rich. It made his slaves very dead. Most lasted only a few months before their bodies gave out. Was placed in a holding cell with 30 other slaves. They came from many different worlds. Some had fur, some had scales, some had skin in colors had never seen, but they all shared the same look, broken, defeated, waiting to die. The head guard of the estate was named. He was tall even for his scales were dark gray, almost black. A long scar ran down one side of his face. He had earned that scar by killing a slave who had tried to escape. He wore it with pride. Enjoyed his job. He liked hurting the weak. He liked watching hope die in their eyes. When he saw the new human slave, he smiled. Fresh meat, fresh entertainment. So this is the creature with spirit, said, walking around slowly. Paid good credits for you. Let us see if you are worth it. He struck her with his shock baton, fell but did not cry out. Good, said, you can take pain, you will need that skill here. For the next 2 weeks worked in the mines. She carried heavy rocks. She breathed toxic dust. She ate the scraps they gave her and slept on the hard floor of her cell. She did everything they told her to do. The other slaves thought she had broken quickly. They had seen it before. The ones with spirit always broke the fastest. It was better to have no hope at all than to have hope and lose it. But the other slaves did not know what knew. She was not broken, she was learning. Every day she watched the guards. She counted them, 24 in total. She learned their patrol routes. She noted which ones were lazy and which ones were alert. She saw where they kept their weapons. She found the blind spots in their security. She also learned about themselves. They were strong, yes. Their 4 arms could crush stone. Their scales could stop most blades, but they had weaknesses too. Their joints were exposed. The soft tissue under their arms was not protected by scales. They were fast in short bursts but tired quickly. They could not sustain effort for long. Their species had evolved as ambush predators. They attacked with overwhelming force and won quickly. They did not know how to fight a long battle. Humans were different, knew this. On Earth, her ancestors had hunted animals much larger than themselves. They did not win through strength. They won through endurance. They would chase an animal for hours, for days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. Humans could keep going long after other species gave up. And there was another thing they did not know. Earth's gravity was stronger than Prime. Every human who left Earth had spent their entire life carrying invisible weights. Their muscles were denser. Their bones were harder. They were stronger than they looked. Much stronger. Every night when the guards thought she was sleeping, exercised in her cell. Push-ups, squats, stretches. She shadowboxed against invisible enemies. She was rebuilding the strength that captivity had stolen from her. During her second week, met the young girl from the auction. Her name was Myra. She was assigned to the same work group as. Myra was small and delicate. Her 4 eyes always looked frightened. She had been born on this estate. Her mother had died in the mines when Myra was 10. She had never known anything but slavery. "Why do you exercise?" Myra whispered one night. Their cells were next to each other. "It is pointless. We will all die here." "Maybe," replied, "maybe not. You cannot fight them. They are too strong, too many." Smiled in the darkness. "Have you ever heard of ants, Myra?" "No, what are ants?" "Small creatures from my world. Very, very small. But when they work together, they can bring down animals 1,000 times their size. Size is not everything." Myra was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Why don't you cry? Everyone cries. I hear them at night, but not you." Thought about the question. She thought about her family back on Earth, her mother, her younger brother. She thought about the soldiers she had failed to save, the ones who had died in her arms. "I am saving my tears," finally said. "Crying takes energy. I need all my energy for something else." "For what?" Did not answer, but in the darkness her eyes burned with a fire that had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger. She had made a promise to herself. She would not die on this moon. She would not let Myra die either. The thought they were the predators and she was the prey. They were wrong. The predator was just waiting for the right moment to strike. The 15th day began like every other day. The slaves woke before sunrise. They ate their small meal of paste and water. They lined up for work assignments. The guards watched them with bored eyes. Had almost finished her preparations. She had mapped the entire estate in her mind. She knew every door, every corner, every shadow. She knew which guards were strong and which were weak. She was almost ready. But fate did not wait for her to be ready. Myra was carrying a container of refined ore across the processing yard. The container was heavy, too heavy for her thin arms. She was tired. She had not slept well. Her 4 eyes were blurry with exhaustion. She tripped on a loose stone. The container fell from her hands. It hit the ground and cracked open. Precious ore spilled across the dirt. Weeks of work ruined in a single moment. The yard went silent. Every slave stopped moving. Every guard turned to look. Walked slowly toward Myra. His boots made heavy sounds on the ground. His shock baton crackled with blue lightning. His face twisted into a smile. "Well, well," he said, "the little has made a mess." Myra fell to her knees. "Please," she begged. "It was an accident. I am sorry, please." "Sorry does not clean up the ore, does it?" Looked around at the watching slaves. "This will be a lesson. Everyone will watch. Everyone will learn what happens when you fail." He grabbed Myra by her thin arm and dragged her to the center of the yard. He threw her to the ground in front of the assembled slaves. She was crying now, all 4 of her eyes streaming with tears. Appeared on his balcony above the yard. He leaned on the railing and watched with interest. This was entertainment to him, a break from his boring day. Raised his shock baton high. 20 strikes, he announced. "That is the punishment for destroying property. Count them." Watched from the crowd. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else, from rage. She thought of her mother's words spoken long ago on Earth. "Protect the weak, always protect the weak. That is what makes us human." She thought of the soldiers she had tried to save, the ones who had died anyway. She had promised herself she would not let anyone else die, not if she could stop it. Myra was 16 years old. She was a child. She had done nothing wrong except be tired and weak. Pushed through the crowd of slaves. They moved aside, too afraid to stop her. She walked into the open space where stood over Myra. "Let her go," said. Her voice was calm, quiet, but it carried across the silent yard. Slowly turned to look at her. His face showed confusion, then amusement. The small human was speaking again. "How funny." "The human has something to say," he announced loudly. The other guards laughed. She is a child, said. It was an accident, let her go. And what will you do if I don't, tiny creature? Met his eyes, she did not blink. I will take her punishment, hit me instead. The yard went completely silent. Even the jungle birds seemed to stop their screaming. No slave had ever offered such a thing. It was unheard of. Stared at her, then he laughed, a deep, ugly laugh that echoed off the walls. You want her punishment? Very well, I will give it to you. He released Myra and walked toward. The young scrambled away, her 4 eyes wide with shock. Raised his baton. But I think 20 strikes is not enough for you. You have annoyed me since you arrived. Let us see how long your spirit lasts. He swung the baton. It hit across the shoulder. Lightning burned through her body, her muscles locked. She fell to the ground. 1 counted. Pushed herself up, she stood straight. Frowned, he swung again. The baton cracked against her ribs. 2. Fell, rose again. 3. Fall, rise. 4. Fall, rise. By the 5th strike, something strange was happening, was breathing hard. His arm was getting tired. They were not built for sustained effort. Their bodies were designed for quick, powerful attacks. Extended exertion exhausted them. But kept rising. Her face was covered in blood. Her body trembled with pain, but she kept rising, again and again and again. The watching slaves stared in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. No one could take such punishment and keep standing. It was impossible. But was human, and humans did not know how to quit. After the 10th strike, was panting heavily. His 4 arms hung at his sides. His baton arm shook with fatigue. Stood before him, swaying but upright. Blood dripped from her wounds onto the ground, but her eyes were still burning, still alive. I said, she whispered, don't hit me again. Roared with anger. He raised his baton 1 more time, putting all his remaining strength into the swing. His hand shot up. She caught his wrist. The yard went completely still. No one breathed, no one moved. His fingers closed around this wrist like iron. Her grip was stronger than any human should be, stronger than had ever felt. He looked into her eyes and saw something that made his blood run cold. He saw death looking back at him. The breaking point had come, and everything was about to change. Twisted her grip on his wrist. She had studied them for 2 weeks. She knew their bodies. She knew their scales protected most of their skin, but the joints were different. The joints were weak. A crack echoed across the yard. His wrist broke like dry wood. His scream was loud enough to wake the dead. He had never felt such pain in his life. He was the one who gave pain, not received it. But his scream lasted only a moment. His palm drove upward into his throat. She hit the soft tissue where no scales grew. His windpipe collapsed. He fell to the ground, choking, dying. The yard erupted into chaos. 4 guards rushed toward from different directions. They were big. They were armed. Each had 4 powerful arms. They thought they would crush this tiny human in seconds. They were wrong. The first guard swung all 4 arms at once. It was a powerful attack. It was also predictable. Had watched these guards for 2 weeks. She knew how they fought, always the same, always 4 arms together, always brute force. She ducked under the swing. Her body was small, it was fast. The guard's arms passed over her head. Before he could recover, she drove her knee into the soft tissue under his arm. He gasped. His body bent forward, grabbed his head and used him as a step. She jumped off his falling body and flew toward the second guard. Her elbow connected with his throat. Same weak spot, same result. He went down choking. The third guard was smarter. He grabbed from behind and wrapped all 4 arms around her body. Could crush stone with such grips. He began to squeeze. Felt her ribs bending. She could not breathe. The pressure was immense. But she did not panic. On Earth, she had trained in combat for 10 years. She had won a silver medal in Taekwondo. She had learned MAGA with Special Forces soldiers. She had killed enemies in war. She knew something they did not know. Humans could wait. 10 seconds passed. The guard squeezed harder. His vision began to darken. 20 seconds. The guard's muscles were trembling with effort. 30 seconds. His grip began to weaken. They could not sustain maximum effort. Their bodies were not designed for it. The moment his grip loosened, she drove her thumbs backward into his eyes. He screamed and released her. She spun around and broke his neck with a single strike. The fourth guard ran. Caught him in 7 seconds. Adrenaline was flooding her body now. Humans became faster and stronger when their survival instincts activated. It was an ancient gift from their ancestors, the hunters who had chased animals across the plains of Earth. She killed the fourth guard with a rock she picked up from the ground. Simple, efficient, final. More guards came. The alarm was sounding now. Red lights flashed. Sirens screamed. Every guard on the estate was rushing to the yard. Picked up a fallen shock baton. She also took a knife from one of the dead guards. She faced the coming wave of enemies. The fight lasted 18 minutes. Used everything she knew. She used the corners of buildings to limit how many guards could attack her at once. She used shadows to hide. She used the guards' own bodies as shields against their friends. She took wounds. A blade opened her shoulder. A baton cracked 2 of her ribs. A lucky strike split her eyebrow and blood ran into her eye. But humans could function through damage that would stop any. Human bodies were designed to keep fighting even when injured. It was how their ancestors survived on Earth. It was how survived now. The slaves watched in amazement. Then they began to help. A woman tripped a guard who was running toward. He fell and finished him. An old slave threw dirt into a guard's eyes. Blind, the guard swung wildly and hit nothing but air. And then there was a species known for their size and their peaceful nature. He stood over 2.5 meters tall. His skin was thick like rubber. He had been a slave for 20 years. He had never raised a hand against anyone. But when he saw fighting, something woke inside him. Something old, something angry. He had watched his friends die in these mines. He had watched children beaten. He had done nothing because he believed it was hopeless. But this small human was showing him it was not hopeless. She was fighting. She was winning. Roared, the sound shook the ground. He grabbed 2 guards and crushed them against the wall with his massive hands. Then he grabbed a third. The tide was turning. At minute 19 stood in front of Smanner. Behind her, the yard was littered with fallen guards. 24 had come to stop her. 24 had failed. She was covered in blood. Her body was broken in many places. She could barely stand. But she was still standing. Appeared in the doorway of his manor. His face was pale with fear. In his hand was a plasma pistol. The weapon shook as he pointed it at. "What are you?" he whispered. His voice cracked with terror. Looked at him. Her eyes burned brighter than ever. "I am human," she said, "and you should have listened when I warned you." She took a step forward. Then another. Then another. The final confrontation was about to begin. His hand trembled as he aimed the plasma pistol at. The weapon could burn a hole through metal. It could vaporize flesh and bone. One shot would end this nightmare. "Stop," he commanded. His voice was high with fear. "Stop or I will shoot." Did not stop. She limped forward, one painful step at a time. Blood left a trail behind her on the ground. Her body was screaming for her to rest, to give up, to lie down and die. She ignored it. "You're dying," said. His 4 arms were shaking now. "That wound on your shoulder. You have lost too much blood. You cannot survive." "Probably," agreed. She took another step. "I will shoot you." "You will try." Fired. The plasma bolt streaked through the air, bright and deadly. Moved. Not fast enough to dodge completely, but fast enough that the bolt hit her side instead of her heart. The impact spun her around. She fell to one knee. For a moment she stayed there. Smoke rose from the wound. The pain was beyond anything she had ever felt. Then she stood up. Stared in horror. She should be dead. Any would be dead. But this human, this tiny creature he had bought for 450 credits, was still standing. "How?" he whispered. "How are you doing this?" Took another step, then another. Each one cost her everything. Each one brought her closer. "On Earth," she said, her voice rough with pain, "we have a history. Thousands of years ago we hunted animals bigger than us, stronger than us, faster than us. We did not win through power. We won because we never stopped." She was 3 steps away now. "We followed our prey for days. When they ran, we walked. When they stopped to rest, we caught up. When they ran again, we followed again. Eventually they would collapse from exhaustion, but we would still be coming." 2 steps. That is what we are. We are the species that does not stop. We do not know how. When we decide something matters, we will die before we give up. 1 step. And you reached out and grabbed weapon arm. You hurt a child. You hurt someone I decided to protect. She twisted. His arm broke with a wet snap. The pistol fell from his fingers. Screamed. He swung his other arms at her. She broke them too, one by one. 4 arms, 4 breaks. The sound was terrible. His screams were worse. When she was done, lay on the ground before her. His 4 arms bent at wrong angles. His face was wet with tears. He was helpless. The slaves had gathered behind, all 30 of them. They stared at the fallen master with different emotions. Some felt joy. Some felt fear. Some could not believe what they were seeing. Myra pushed through the crowd. Her 4 eyes were wide. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. She ran to and wrapped her thin arms around the human woman. "You saved me," Myra whispered. Why would you hurt yourself for me?" Hugged her back with her one good arm. "Because you matter, Myra. You always mattered. Someone just needed to remind you." She looked down at the wealthy merchant who had bought and sold beings like property, the man who had thought himself untouchable. "Kill me," begged. "Just kill me and end it." Shook her head. "No, death is too easy for you." She looked at the giant who had finally found his courage. "Help me move him." Together, they dragged to the slave cages, the same cages where he had kept living beings for years. They threw him inside and locked the door. "The authorities will come eventually," said to the gathered slaves. "There is a communication center in the manor. We can call for help. Until they arrive, he can learn what it feels like to be in a cage." 3 days later, a United Earth patrol ship arrived. They had received the distress signal had sent from the estate's communication array. Lieutenant was first through the airlock. He was a young officer, only 25 years old. He had never seen anything like the scene that waited for him. The mining estate was under the control of freed slaves. Wounded guards were locked in cells. And in the medical bay, a single human woman was stitching her own wounds with steady hands. Sergeant Park checked his twice. "We searched for you for 3 months. Your shuttle crash was listed as having no survivors." Looked up from her work. She was pale from blood loss. Her body was covered in bandages and bruises, but she smiled. "The report was wrong," she said. Looked around at the freed slaves, the fallen guards, the entire estate that had been conquered by one person. "What happened here?" he asked. Myra answered for. The young stood tall for the first time in her life. Her 4 eyes shone with something new. Hope. "She happened," Myra said. "They laughed at her, they hit her. She told them to stop, they laughed again." Myra took his hand and held it gently. "They should not have laughed." 6 months later, the slave trade collapsed. The story of what happened on 3 spread across 12 star systems. 1 human, 24 guards, 20 minutes. Nobody left standing. Within 5 years, humanity had helped protect 18 species that had once been enslaved. The galaxy learned a new truth about the humans of Earth. They were small, they were fragile, they did not look dangerous. But when they decided to protect someone, nothing in the universe could stop them. Park returned to Earth. She received a medal from the United Earth government. She never wore it. She opened a small medical clinic in her of. She never spoke about what happened on the jungle moon. But every week, without fail, a communication came through from across the stars. Myra, now working as a medic herself, would call just to talk, just to say thank you, and would smile and say the same thing every time. You were worth it, Myra, you always were. In bars and space stations across the galaxy, a new saying spread among those who knew the story. Never corner a human, they don't know how to quit. And never ever ignore their warnings. They mean every word.